Your emotions aren't depth. They're leverage others use to steer you. Every attachment exposes you. Detach or remain a domesticated asset in someone else's strategy. You were trained to believe that emotional openness is strength, that loyalty is noble, that empathy makes you superior. It doesn't. It makes you readable, predictable, usable. From childhood, you were conditioned to equate emotional expression with moral worth. If you felt deeply, you were good. If you detached, you were cold. Society rewards the man who bleeds publicly because he is easy to steer. His reactions can be anticipated. His guilt can be triggered. His fear of losing connection can be weaponized. Virtue, as you were taught, is not a moral code. It is a leash. Emotional attachment feels powerful because it creates intensity. You mistake intensity for depth. You mistake vulnerability for courage. But intensity is simply exposure, and exposure in any power structure is liability. Consider this. The moment someone knows what hurts you, they possess leverage. The moment someone knows what you fear losing, they control your direction. You call this trust. Strategists call it access. You were told that withholding emotion is repression, that detachment is unhealthy, that indifference is cruelty. These narratives serve one purpose: to keep you integrated into systems that require your emotional compliance. A detached man is difficult to influence. A detached man negotiates without fear. A detached man walks away without collapsing. That is dangerous. So culture reframed detachment as defect. It painted the emotionally sovereign man as damaged. Meanwhile, the emotionally expressive man is praised, validated, and, most importantly, kept dependent on external affirmation. Look carefully at the environments you move through. Relationships, workplaces, social hierarchies. The most emotionally invested individual is rarely the one with control. The one who needs reassurance loses leverage. The one who fears disapproval bends first. The one who cannot tolerate being misunderstood will over-explain, justify, and plead. Each of those behaviors leaks power. Emotional attachment creates invisible contracts. When you attach, you silently agree, I need this. I cannot afford to lose this. I will adjust to preserve this. And the moment you adjust from fear of loss, you surrender negotiation strength. Machiavelli understood something most modern men refuse to accept. People are moved by self-interest before sentiment. Loyalty shifts when incentives shift. Affection dissolves under pressure. Promises bend when survival demands it. But you, emotionally invested, expect constancy. You expect reciprocity. You expect your intensity to be mirrored. That expectation is weakness disguised as romance. You think your depth makes you rare. In reality, it makes you easier to anchor. The more you attach your identity to a person, a role, or a perception, the more controllable you become. Attachment narrows your options. Detachment multiplies them. The illusion of virtue convinces you that suffering for others is noble, that sacrificing your standards proves integrity, that emotional endurance is admirable. In strategy, suffering without leverage is stupidity. A sovereign man does not eliminate emotion, he regulates its visibility. He does not suppress attachment, he limits its authority. He feels, but he does not kneel to feeling. You were not trained to regulate emotion, you were trained to display it, to process it publicly, to confess it, to apologize for it, to center it in every decision. That training benefits everyone except you. Power requires distance. Distance creates perspective. Perspective eliminates panic. And without panic, you cannot be rushed, baited, or emotionally cornered. The illusion is this, that closeness equals safety.
In reality, closeness creates vulnerability. The closer you stand to something, the harder it is to see its structure. The more you are attached, the more distorted your judgment becomes. You excuse red flags, you rationalize disrespect, you compromise standards to preserve connection. That is not love. That is dependency negotiating against itself. Virtue, as you were taught, is a moral anesthetic. It numbs your instinct for power in exchange for social approval. It tells you that being needed is better than being sovereign, that being chosen is superior to being untouchable. But the man who must be chosen is already beneath the chooser. Detachment is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the refusal to let emotion dictate strategy. It is the discipline of observing without merging. You can care, you cannot cling. The illusion of virtue kept you attached. The moment you see attachment as leverage against you, something shifts. The emotional intensity you once worshipped begins to look like exposure. And once you recognize exposure as risk, you stop volunteering your vulnerabilities in the name of morality. This is the first fracture in your old identity. You are not good because you feel deeply. You are controlled because you feel openly. The shift begins when you stop equating emotional transparency with strength and start viewing it as a strategic decision. Nothing more, nothing less. Emotion is not just a feeling, it is a handle. If someone can predict your emotional reaction, they can predict your behavior. And if they can predict your behavior, they can design the environment around you. That is control. You believe you feel naturally. You don't. You react predictably. Guilt, validation seeking, fear of abandonment, desire to be respected. Each one is a lever. When someone withdraws attention and you panic internally, that is not love. That is dependency reacting to scarcity. The moment you chase to restore balance, the power dynamic shifts. The one who withdraws dictates the tempo. You become the responder. Responders do not control outcomes. They manage anxiety. Guilt is another efficient mechanism. You're told that disappointing someone is morally wrong, so when pressure is applied, "I thought you cared," or "I guess I don't matter," you adjust your behavior to remove discomfort. You call this empathy. It is behavioral conditioning. The human nervous system is wired to avoid rejection. That biological wiring is exploited constantly. In relationships, silence becomes punishment. In workplaces, approval becomes currency. In social hierarchies, status becomes validation. And you, emotionally invested, begin optimizing your behavior for emotional reward. You speak softer to avoid tension. You agree faster to avoid conflict. You over-deliver to secure approval. Every adjustment leaks authority. Understand this clearly. Whoever is less emotionally affected has structural advantage. If you fear losing the relationship more than she does, she has leverage. If you fear losing the job more than your employer fears you, they have leverage. If you fear social exclusion more than the group fears your absence, they have leverage. Emotion reveals dependency ratios. The more emotionally reactive you are, the more visible your dependence becomes, and dependency invites pressure, not always maliciously, often unconsciously. Humans test boundaries instinctively. They observe where resistance is weakest. They lean there. If you react strongly to criticism, you will be criticized more. If you react strongly to distance, distance will be used strategically. If you react strongly to praise, praise will be rationed. You train people how to move you. Machiavelli understood that appearances can be manipulated because people respond emotionally before rationally. That principle does not only apply to rulers and citizens, it applies to lovers, colleagues, friends. When your emotional state can be influenced externally, your strategic consistency collapses. You become situational, reactive, impulsive. Emotion accelerates decisions. Power requires delay. The one who pauses while you react studies the field. The one who remains composed while you escalate sees angles you cannot. Your raised voice, your long message, your emotional explanation, each one reveals more than you intend. Exposure multiplies under stress. You believe expressing emotion is honest. Sometimes it is, but honesty without discretion is intelligence without armor. Emotional control is rarely about dramatic manipulation. It is subtle. It is tone shifts. It is delayed replies. It is selective validation. It is calibrated distance. And you feel it. You feel the anxiety when communication changes. You feel.
There are two versions of you. One negotiates from fear of loss. The other negotiates from abundance of options. The attached man builds his identity around being needed. He prides himself on loyalty, on emotional availability, on sacrifice. He believes depth will secure permanence. He believes intensity creates value. It doesn't. It creates dependency. The attached man over-explains. When tension rises, he rushes to clarify. When accused, he defends immediately. When distance appears, he closes it. His instinct is preservation. Preserve connection. Preserve perception. Preserve approval. Preservation is defensive strategy. Defensive strategy signals vulnerability. Watch his patterns. He double texts when ignored. He justifies when misunderstood. He compromises standards to maintain peace. He tolerates subtle disrespect because confrontation risks loss. He calls this maturity. It is fear wearing diplomacy. He monitors shifts obsessively, tone changes, delays, facial expressions. He reads into everything because everything feels like a threat to attachment. His nervous system becomes hyper-alert. He is not operating strategically, he is operating protectively. Protection is reactive. Now observe the sovereign man. He does not center his identity on being chosen, he centers it on self-sufficiency. He does not chase reassurance because his stability is internal. When tension rises, he does not rush to dissolve it, he evaluates it. Evaluation creates distance. Distance creates leverage. The sovereign man speaks less when pressured, not as punishment, but as control. Silence forces others to reveal more. When accused, he listens without scrambling to defend. When distance appears, he does not close it automatically. He assesses whether it deserves pursuit. He does not fear being misunderstood. He understands that not all perceptions require correction. This is the critical difference. The attached man seeks harmony. The sovereign man seeks position. Harmony feels good. Position wins outcomes. The attached man reacts emotionally and then rationalizes his reaction afterward. The sovereign man observes emotion but delays expression. He asks, is this reaction useful? Is this display strategic? Does revealing this strengthen or weaken my position? That pause is power. The attached man negotiates with hidden desperation. Even when subtle, it leaks. You can hear it in his tone when he asks for reassurance. You can see it in the speed of his replies. You can sense it in how quickly he forgives without recalibration. Desperation does not need to be loud to be detected. Humans are experts at sensing imbalance, and imbalance invites dominance. The sovereign man operates differently. He is selective with investment. He does not flood situations with emotional labor. He does not attempt to fix every rupture. If something fractures, he evaluates whether it aligns with his standards. If it doesn't, he removes himself without drama. Detachment makes removal clean. The attached man fears removal.
Removal feels like rejection. Rejection feels like identity collapse, so he negotiates against himself to avoid it. He reduces expectations. He tolerates inconsistencies. He convinces himself that endurance equals strength. It doesn't. It equals adaptation to discomfort. The sovereign man understands selection. Not everyone qualifies for proximity. Not every opportunity deserves commitment. Not every emotional spark deserves fuel. He selects. He does not beg to be selected. The attached man believes love, respect, and opportunity are scarce. Scarcity fuels urgency. Urgency fuels mistakes. He commits too quickly. He invests too heavily. He reveals too much too soon. The sovereign man assumes abundance until proven otherwise. Abundance creates calm. Calm sharpens perception. He withholds depth until consistency is demonstrated. He tests reliability before investing emotionally. Testing is strategic. Overinvesting is impulsive. This is not about cruelty. It is about architecture. One builds life on emotional reaction. The other builds life on structural control. The attached man measures worth by how intensely he feels. The sovereign man measures worth by how steadily he stands. Intensity burns fast. Stability compounds. You were praised for being attached, for caring deeply, for sacrificing quickly. Those traits made it easier to predict. The more you centered your identity around emotional loyalty, the easier it became to corner you with it. You said you cared. I thought you were different. After everything I've done. Each phrase is a rope. The attached man tightens it around his own neck by trying to prove himself. The sovereign man steps back and asks, does this align with my standards? If not, he disengages, not angrily, not dramatically, cleanly. Clean exits are terrifying to those who rely on emotional leverage. The difference between these two men is not empathy. It is authority over self. One is governed by attachment. The other governs it. Right now, you know which version you default to under pressure. And the version you default to under pressure is your true power level. History does not remember the most emotionally expressive men. It remembers the most controlled. Power has never belonged to the most compassionate voice in the room. It has belonged to the one who could calculate without flinching, the one who could delay gratification, the one who could sacrifice comfort for position. You romanticize warmth. History records decisiveness. Study empires, corporations, dynasties. The pattern is consistent. Leaders who allowed personal attachment to override strategic clarity collapsed. Those who separated feeling from decision-making consolidated control. This is not about cruelty. It is about filtration. When a ruler allowed friendship to dictate military placement, betrayal followed. When a commander prioritized emotional loyalty over competence, defeat followed. When a man in power chose sentiment over structure, he weakened the system around him. Emotion narrows perception. It introduces bias. It clouds risk assessment. Under pressure, attachment distorts judgment. You ignore warning signs because you are invested. You reinterpret disrespect as misunderstanding. You postpone decisive action because you fear emotional fallout. History punishes hesitation rooted in attachment. Machiavelli observed this without illusion. He understood that people are volatile, driven by self-interest, responsive to fear and incentive more than affection. A leader who governed through emotional dependency made himself vulnerable to shifts in loyalty. A leader who governed through calculated distance maintains stability. Distance creates clarity. Look at how power structures maintain dominance. They do not beg for approval. They do not explain every decision emotionally. They project composure. They operate with controlled disclosure. Their strength lies in unpredictability combined with internal consistency. Predictable emotion is exploitable. The man who rages on cue can be provoked. The man who pleads on cue can be pressured. The man who collapses when isolated can be isolated strategically. History's survivors were difficult to move emotionally. They did not broadcast fear. They did not negotiate from desperation. They did not allow personal attachment to dictate public strategy. This principle scales down to your life. You are not leading armies, but you are navigating hierarchies. Relationships are hierarchies. Workplaces are hierarchies. Social circles are hierarchies. In every hierarchy, emotional control signals strength. When you remain composed under attack, you disrupt expectations. When you refuse to escalate emotionally, you control tempo. When you can walk away without visible damage, you command respect, whether spoken or silent. Detachment unsettles because it cannot be steered easily. Throughout history, emotional indulgence has been framed as virtue for the masses. Emotional discipline has been reserved for the architects of systems. The more influence someone holds, the less emotionally reactive they can afford to be. Reaction shrinks authority. Consider negotiations. The party most eager to close loses leverage. The party most willing to delay dictates terms. The party least emotionally attached to the outcome shapes it. This is not philosophy, it is structural reality. You were conditioned to equate emotional transparency with authenticity, but in power dynamics, transparency without strategy is exposure. The battlefield does not reward exposed positions, it exploits them. Even in personal relationships, the same pattern holds. The partner more afraid of loss concedes more. The employee more afraid of unemployment tolerates more. The friend more afraid of exclusion adjusts more. Fear of loss is emotional gravity. It pulls you downward in every hierarchy. History is brutal in its lessons.
Detachment is not a mood, it is a discipline. You do not feel detached, you practice controlled response until emotional neutrality becomes default under pressure. That is training, that is weaponization. First principle, reduce visible reaction. When provoked, slow your tempo, speak less, lower your tone. Eliminate emotional spikes from your delivery. The objective is not suppression, it is concealment. A strategist does not reveal internal turbulence unless it serves him. Reaction feeds opposition. Composure starves it. If someone attempts to trigger guilt, do not rush to defend. If someone attempts to provoke anger, do not escalate. If someone withdraws attention to create anxiety, do not chase. Chasing confirms leverage. Instead, observe. Let silence stretch. Let discomfort exist without scrambling to remove it. The majority of people cannot tolerate silence. They will fill it with information. That information exposes motive. Second principle, control emotional investment. Stop over-disclosing. Stop narrating your internal state. Stop confessing vulnerability prematurely. Emotional depth should be earned through consistency, not handed out through impulse. Selective disclosure is strength. When you reveal everything, you eliminate mystery. When you eliminate mystery, you eliminate tension, and tension is influence. The less predictable you are emotionally, the harder you are to manipulate. Third principle, detach from outcomes. You must train yourself to want without needing. This is surgical. Before entering negotiation, romantic, professional, social, ask yourself, if this disappears tomorrow, do I remain structurally intact? If the answer is no, you are negotiating from weakness. Structural integrity means alternatives, options, self-generated momentum. The more your stability depends on one person, one opportunity, one perception, the easier you are to bend. Build redundancy in your life, socially, financially, emotionally. Redundancy reduces desperation. Reduced desperation increases leverage.
Fourth principle: delay emotional decisions. Never decide while elevated, whether by anger, attraction, or fear. Elevation compresses perception. Delay expands it. If something triggers you, wait. If something excites you intensely, wait. Time neutralizes impulsivity. The man who decides instantly under emotional influence is predictable. The man who pauses becomes unreadable. Unreadable men are difficult to control. Fifth principle: master exit readiness. The power to leave without collapse changes every interaction. If you know you can remove yourself cleanly, without begging, without explaining excessively, without seeking closure, you negotiate differently. Your posture shifts, your tone shifts, your tolerance decreases. You stop enduring what does not meet standard. Most men stay too long because they are emotionally anchored. They fear the vacuum that follows detachment. But the vacuum is not death, it is recalibration. When you can exit without drama, others sense it, and when they sense it, they adjust their behavior accordingly. People treat you based on the leverage they believe they hold over you. Remove perceived leverage, watch the shift. Strategic detachment also requires internal discipline. You will feel impulses to explain, to fix, to chase, to reassure. These impulses are conditioning surfacing. Do not obey them automatically. Observe them. Impulse is not command. The more you practice restraint, the more stable your baseline becomes. Stability compounds. You become harder to provoke, harder to guilt, harder to emotionally corner. This is not about becoming indifferent to everything. It is about selective emotional allocation. Invest where standards are met, withdraw where they are violated. Without tantrum, without spectacle. Calm withdrawal is more powerful than emotional confrontation. Finally, refine your presence. Speak slower. Move deliberately. Avoid overcommitment. Let others reveal their investment level first. If they overextend emotionally, do not mirror immediately. Maintain pace. Control of pace is control of frame. The goal is not to dominate aggressively. It is to remain internally unshaken regardless of external shifts. When praise comes, you do not inflate. When criticism comes, you do not shrink. When distance appears, you do not scramble. You remain centered. And when you remain centered, you become the axis others orient around. Strategic detachment is not coldness for its own sake. It is insulation against manipulation. It is armor against emotional volatility. It is clarity under pressure. Weaponized detachment transforms you from participant to architect, from reactor to observer, from dependent to sovereign. And once you feel the stability of that shift, you will never want to return to emotional exposure as default. The final step is not behavioral, it is surgical. You do not simply act detached, you eliminate the identity that requires attachment to survive. The dependent self is subtle. It hides behind virtue. It says, I just care deeply. I'm just loyal. I just want honesty. No. It wants reassurance. It wants validation. It wants permanence in a world built on shifting incentives. The dependent self cannot tolerate uncertainty. When communication changes, it panics. When affection cools, it spirals. When respect feels threatened, it overcorrects. Its survival depends on external stability. That is fragility. You must understand something brutal. If your emotional state is regulated by someone else's behavior, you are not sovereign. You are outsourced. Killing the dependent self means removing the need to be understood. You stop explaining your depth to people who cannot perceive it. You stop proving loyalty to those who test it. You stop negotiating your standards to avoid temporary discomfort. You accept misinterpretation. You accept distance. You accept that some people will not choose you, and you do not collapse when they don't. This is identity death. The old version of you believed connection secured safety. The new version understands that internal stability secures position. The old version feared being replaced. The new version assumes replacement is natural and prepares accordingly. You stop building your worth on exclusivity. You build it on independence. Independence is quiet. It does not announce detachment. It demonstrates it. When someone withdraws, you do not scramble. When someone threatens departure, you do not plead. When someone attempts to provoke jealousy, you do not perform. You observe, you assess, you decide. That is sovereignty. The dependent self equated intensity with value. The sovereign self values consistency over intensity. It invests slowly. It removes slowly. It does not attach its identity to volatile dynamics. You must also release the fantasy that emotional sacrifice guarantees loyalty. It does not. People stay where incentives align. When alignment shifts, they shift. Accept this without bitterness. Bitterness is wounded attachment speaking. Clarity is emotional detachment solidified. Killing the dependent self means you stop romanticizing struggle. If something consistently destabilizes you, you reduce exposure. If someone repeatedly disrespects your standards, you reduce access. No speeches, no emotional ultimatums, just recalibration. Recalibration is power in motion. The sovereign self understands that being alone is not loss, it is control of environment. Solitude becomes training ground, not punishment. You refine skills, you expand options, you strengthen structural independence. Options eliminate desperation. When you have options, socially, financially, emotionally, you do not cling. Clinging is the language of scarcity. Sovereignty is the language of abundance. This transformation is uncomfortable because it removes emotional theaters. There is no dramatic declaration, no revenge arc, no emotional eruption, just a quiet severance from dependency. You stop seeking closure from those who destabilized you. You generate your own. You stop waiting for validation. You validate